Hi everyone, my name's Alex. I'm 20 years old, and today I want to share with you the most unexpected and unforgettable Easter of my life. Last year, I decided to travel alone to Rome during Easter break. I had no idea that a spontaneous trip would end up changing the way I look at life. Let me take you back to where it all started. It was early April, a couple of weeks before Easter. I was sitting in my tiny apartment, feeling completely burnt out. I'd just finished my university midterms, was going through some personal stuff, and honestly, I just needed a break. Not just from work and studies, but from everything. I wanted to feel something different. So, without much planning, I booked a flight to Rome. I had always dreamed of visiting the Eternal City, and I thought, why not now? I landed in Rome on Holy Thursday, just a few days before Easter Sunday. It was early afternoon when the plane touched down at Fiumicino Airport. As I stepped off and felt the warm Mediterranean breeze for the first time, something inside me shifted. It wasn't just excitement. It was a strange mix of nerves, anticipation, and a sense of freedom I hadn't felt in a long time. The airport was busy, but surprisingly calm. People were smiling, speaking in rapid Italian, welcoming their families, rolling suitcases across shiny floors. Everything felt alive. I grabbed my small backpack and hopped on the Leonardo Express train to the city center. Sitting by the window, I watched as the suburbs slowly turned into old buildings, graffiti-covered walls, and then, suddenly, ruins and domes. As the train approached Termini station, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the glass. I looked tired, but hopeful. This was the first real trip I'd ever taken alone. No parents, no friends, no schedule. Just me and a city I had dreamed about for years. From Termini, I took a taxi to my Airbnb in Trastevere. The driver didn't speak much English, but he nodded and smiled as I showed him the address. He had the windows down, letting in the spring air, and classic Italian music played quietly on the radio. I remember passing by the Colosseum on the way. Seeing it for the first time made my heart skip a beat. It looked even more majestic than in pictures, almost surreal. Trastevere was everything I hoped for, and more. The narrow cobblestone streets were lined with ochre-colored buildings, their walls slightly cracked from time but full of charm. Plants spilled from tiny balconies, laundry hung lazily above alleyways, and you could smell fresh bread and espresso from every corner. The vibe was relaxed, artistic, a little bohemian. I instantly felt like I belonged. My Airbnb host, a sweet older lady named Lucia, welcomed me with a warm smile and a small packet of biscotti. She showed me around the little apartment, just one room with a bed, a tiny kitchen, and a window that looked out onto a quiet piazza. It was perfect. I didn't want to waste a minute. After a quick shower, I headed out to explore, without any specific destination in mind. I crossed the Tiber River via the Ponte Sisto, the sun starting to dip low in the sky. Rome at golden hour is something magical. Everything glows. The river shimmered, street musicians played romantic tunes, and people sat on the bridges, sharing wine and laughter. I could hear multiple languages being spoken around me, but somehow it all blended into one peaceful melody. Eventually, I found myself in Piazza Navona, completely by accident. The fountains, the street performers, the soft laughter of couples, it all felt like a movie. I bought a small cup of stracciatella gelato, and sat on a bench, just watching life unfold around me. No rush, no pressure, just presence. That first evening, Rome welcomed me with open arms. It didn't feel like I was a tourist. It felt like the city was whispering, "Slow down, breathe, you're safe here." And for the first time in a long while, I actually listened. Easter Sunday in Rome is like nothing I've ever experienced. I woke up early that morning, before the sun had fully risen, with a strange feeling in my chest, like something big was about to happen. The city outside my window was unusually quiet, almost sacred. Birds chirped softly, and the faint smell of fresh pastries drifted up from the cafe downstairs. I threw on a clean shirt, grabbed my notebook and camera, and headed out before 7 a.m. The streets were nearly empty, the golden light of dawn stretching across the cobblestones like a warm blanket. I walked in silence, making my way slowly towards St. Peter's Basilica in Vatican City. I had no ticket for the Easter Mass, but I wanted to be near it, to feel the atmosphere, to witness the moment. When I arrived at St. Peter's Square, I was amazed to find thousands of people already gathered from all around the world. Some were kneeling in prayer, others chatting quietly, many just standing still, staring up at the majestic facade of the basilica. Flags waved gently in the breeze, and a massive floral display covered the steps leading to the altar outside. The scent of lilies and roses floated in the air. Despite the crowd, there was a deep sense of peace. I didn't understand much of what was being said during the Mass. I only caught fragments of Latin and Italian, but that didn't matter. What moved me was the unity. So many people from different countries, cultures, and languages, all standing together for something greater than themselves. As the Pope finally appeared to give his blessing, a hush fell over the entire square. It was powerful. Even from where I stood, far in the back, I felt something shift inside me. After the ceremony, I wandered through the quiet streets behind the Vatican. The city was still waking up. I walked without a plan, my thoughts full. At some point, I stopped at a small family-owned restaurant, where the owner invited me in like I was a regular. He served me a traditional Easter lunch, roast lamb, artichokes, and a slice of colomba di Pasqua, a soft dove-shaped cake dusted with sugar and almonds. I sat by the window, watching the world go by, grateful for the simplicity of the moment. Later that afternoon, I crossed back into the heart of Rome and climbed the Janiculum Hill to Piazzale Garibaldi, one of the best viewpoints in the city. From there, I could see the rooftops of Rome stretching endlessly into the distance. Church bells rang out from every direction. I took a deep breath and sat down to write in my journal. I wrote about the people I'd seen, the feeling of connection, the beauty of the day, the strange comfort I'd found being alone in such a big place. That evening, as the sun set over the city, I walked along the Via dei Fori Imperiali, the ruins of ancient Rome lit softly by golden lights. Tourists had thinned out, and locals walked slowly with their families, many still dressed in their Easter best. I watched a little girl chase pigeons around the Colosseum, laughing uncontrollably, and I couldn't help but smile. Something about that day changed me. Maybe it was the silence of the sunrise, the powerful stillness of the square, or just the sense of being part of something universal. I realized that Easter wasn't just about traditions or religion, it was about renewal, A reminder that we can start again, that even in the middle of chaos or uncertainty, there is always space for beauty, for meaning, for connection. As I walked home that night through the soft, glowing streets of Rome, I didn't feel alone anymore. I felt grounded, reconnected, at peace. On Easter Sunday, something happened that I'll never forget. I woke up early and decided to head toward the Colosseum. I wanted to see it before the crowds arrived. The streets were still quiet, and the morning light made the ancient stones glow. As I was walking near the Roman Forum, I noticed a small group gathered near the Arch of Constantine. A man, maybe in his 30s, was sitting on the ground with a guitar. His case was open, and he was singing softly in Italian. What struck me most was how genuinely emotional his performance was. I didn't understand the lyrics, but I could feel the pain and passion in his voice. I stood there for a while, and eventually he finished the song and looked up. Our eyes met. I dropped a few euros in his case and smiled. He smiled back and said in English, "You look like you have something heavy on your heart." That hit me. I hadn't told anyone how lost I'd been feeling lately, but he saw it, just like that. He introduced himself as Marco, and we ended up sitting and talking for almost an hour. He told me about how he'd once been a musician in a big band, but left everything behind to find peace and authenticity. He said Rome taught him that it's okay to slow down, to breathe, and to let go of who you thought you were supposed to be. Then he said something I'll never forget. Maybe Easter isn't just about resurrection in the religious sense. Maybe it's also about allowing yourself to start again. That line stayed with me. On my last full day in Rome, I decided to walk with no destination in mind. I had already seen most of the tourist spots, taken all the pictures I needed, eaten all the gelato I could possibly handle, but something told me I wasn't quite finished. There was still a kind of weight on my shoulders, something I had brought with me from home, and deep down, I knew I had to leave it behind. I wandered into Villa Borghese, a massive park just north of the city center. The sun was soft that morning, filtered through the trees, and the air smelled like spring. I found a quiet path away from the usual crowds and just walked. Birds chirped, children laughed in the distance, couples passed me hand in hand, and I started thinking about everything I'd been carrying. Before this trip, I had felt stuck, caught in a cycle of doubt, pressure, and expectations, about school, about my future, about who I was supposed to be. I'd been comparing myself to everyone around me, always feeling like I wasn't doing enough, wasn't becoming enough. I came to Rome hoping the change of scenery would clear my mind, maybe even give me some answers. But what I hadn't expected was how this city, with all its layers of history and emotion, would gently show me the truth I needed to face. Sometimes, in order to move forward, we have to let go. I found a bench under a blooming tree and sat down. I pulled out my journal, now almost full, and just started writing. Not about the sights or the food, or even the people I'd met. I wrote to myself. I wrote about the pressure I had felt, the fears I hadn't admitted, the insecurities I usually brushed aside. I wrote without filters, letting every thought spill onto the page. And then I paused. I closed the journal. And I cried. It wasn't a dramatic movie cry. It was quiet, private, a kind of soft release I hadn't realized I needed. The kind of cry that doesn't come from sadness, but from finally making peace with something. I realized I had been holding on to this idea that I had to figure everything out now, that I had to have a plan, a purpose, a polished version of myself to present to the world. But sitting there, in the calm of that Roman morning, I understood something else. It's okay not to know. Letting go didn't mean giving up. It meant allowing space for something new to come in. It meant giving myself permission to grow at my own pace, to fail, to try again, to just be. That afternoon, I did something symbolic. I tore out one page from the journal, one where I had written down all the thoughts that had been holding me back, and I walked to the edge of the Tiber River. I folded the paper gently, whispered a quiet goodbye to everything it represented, and let it go into the water. I watched it float away, carried by the current, disappearing around the bend. It was simple, but powerful. I didn't expect some big cinematic moment afterward, but as I walked away from the river, I did feel lighter, clearer, like I had finally made room for something better. And in a strange way, I felt proud of myself, not for being perfect, but for being honest, for facing what I needed to face, for letting go. On my last day in Rome, I walked through the city one last time, stopping for espresso at my favorite cafe, buying a small book from a street vendor, and saying goodbye to the people I'd met along the way. When I passed the place where I'd met Marco, he wasn't there, but I left a note in his guitar case. Thank you. You helped me find peace. I flew home the next morning with a suitcase full of memories and a heart that felt lighter. Looking back, that Easter trip to Rome didn't give me all the answers I was searching for, but it gave me something better, a new way of seeing the world and myself. I realized that you don't need to go far to find clarity. You just need to be open to new experiences, to people, to stillness. Sometimes a stranger can say the words you didn't know you needed. Sometimes the act of getting lost in a city helps you find your way. So if you're feeling stuck or burnt out, or like you're carrying something too heavy, maybe what you need is a little space, a little beauty, and the courage to wander without a map. That's what Rome gave me. And that's the gift of Easter, a quiet reminder that no matter where you are in life, there's always the chance to begin again. Thanks for listening to my story. If it moved you, I'd love it if you liked this video, subscribed to Lingoverse, and shared it with someone who might need a little inspiration too.